Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Very welcome. You're very welcome to this panel. Welcome everybody, and thank you for participating. I am Elena Pozzoli. I am the exhibition manager of the Bologna Children's Book Fair. This year we have been missing a lot the meetings, the fairs, and I think that we all look forward to meeting again. But we have tried to do our job and to keep warm our relations thanks to these digital tools. And all of us have been able to do big upgrades in the knowledge of this. So I cannot say that I'm happy to be meeting for the Frankfurt Book Fair on the screen. Anyway, it would be better to be meeting there physically. But anyway, we have decided to organize some panels in these days to announce the new things that we will be bringing to Bologna. And one of these new things is the Comics Corner. Actually, it's new. It's not brand new because it should have been held in Bologna last May. It wasn't. Anyway, we have worked a lot on this topic. So let me say that I feel like we are going to have a kind of a second edition and not exactly the first edition of the Comics Corner next April. We will have a program. We will have the second edition of the Bologna Ragazzi Award special category comics. I'm very happy to have here with us Riccardo Liniers, winners of the early reader Bologna Ragazzi Award comics, and Camille Jourdi, who received a special mention as well. And I welcome Emanuele Di Giorgi, publisher at Tunue. And I welcome with a big thank Edna Vodka, journalist at Publishers Weekly. What can I say? Is one of our best friends, one of the best friends of Bologna, is being with us for a long time, and we are so proud, happy, and proud, let me say, to have him with us on our side. Anytime we ask, anytime is with us. So thank you very much for accepting to moderate also this panel. So I really hope to meet you all in Bologna next April. I don't want to take any more time for the discussion. So thank you very much. I am sorry, I didn't introduce Stephanie Johnson. She is our translator. What can I say? She's one of the best friends as well, because how many years? I think we've been working together for 20, 30 years. Better not to go too deep in this topic, in this issue. Anyway, anytime we want we have to do something we care a lot about, Stephanie is with us, and actually here we are. So thank you very much. I give the floor to Ed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. This is a great opportunity to talk about the most exciting, I think, part of the publishing industry right now, which is the comics and graphic novels for younger readers. Throughout, particularly the last several years, this has really been an area that's exploded, and that publishers have not been able to supply enough books because the market demand is so big. In the United States, obviously names like Raina Telgemeier are known to almost every middle grade student who's a reader. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and this is really her collection is graphic novels. So it's been really exciting to watch. And frankly, I just want to say thank you to the industry for producing work that really is so enticing and exciting for young readers who might be intimidated by just a block of text. So just to get things started a little bit, I would like everybody to, all of the panelists, to introduce themselves a little bit, just to tell a little bit about where they are at the moment, where are we talking to you in the world, tell us a little bit about yourself, just to get us started before we ask a few questions. Maybe we'll start with Ricardo, then go to Camille, and then Emanuele. So we start with the authors and then go to the publishing side, if that's okay. So
Okay.
good.
Thank you, Edward.
Of course.
So yeah, my name is Ricardo Siri, and I signed my strips with the name Liniers, which is in Argentina. There's a neighborhood. I'm from Argentina, and there's a neighborhood called Liniers. So it was a very, easy to remember name. And I definitely should have gone with Siri because I would be getting like Apple money left and right now. But I thought Liniers was the way to go. So I have to explain now I'm living in Vermont in United States, and nobody knows how to pronounce Liniers, which is fun. Yeah, but they figured out how to say Schwarzenegger, so I think they'll figure it out eventually. I do a daily strip. I have a daily strip syndicated here in the States in King Features. I've been drawing this strip for the last almost 20 years. Started doing it in Argentina. It's called Macanudo. It's kind of I love all kinds of daily strips. I love Peanuts, and I love The Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes and Mafalda and many Argentinian daily strips that I grew up reading. And when I started doing my daily strip, I decided I would do all of them. I didn't want to do just a kid strip or a weird strip, I just wanted everything because I wanted to do everything. So I do my daily strip. I'm very old school, so I draw the thing and I paint with watercolors, and I just have fun with it, and I have fun with the designs. I go like sometimes a little bit crazy for a daily strip, but it's there. And also I publish other types of books, graphic novels, sometimes grown-up graphic novels, sometimes graphic novels for children. And this I was lucky enough to win the first award for children's comics in Bil Bulbul. So it's amazing. I'm just flabbergasted, and it's with this book called Written and Drawn by Henrietta, or Escrito y Dibujado por Enriqueta is this little girl that I published in my strip. She came out of the strip, and then she ended up in this book. This little cat's name is Fellini. So my apologies to all the Italian people. At some point, I talked with Milo Manara, and he was okay with me naming the cat Fellini. But I love Federico Fellini, and that was my little strange homage. And it's a short story, a little graphic novel, and it's like two stories in one. We have the little girl and Fellini writing the story, and then the story is like in real time as they write, the story progresses. And what I kind of wanted to do with it was to show kids that you don't have to be Michelangelo or Caravaggio to be a cartoonist. You can, with very little, say a lot. And I wanted them to see that with Henrietta drawing like a little girl, she could tell an actual story, and show them how the story, even for the writer, it surprises you. You don't know where you're going. You even might get like surprised and scared, and curious about where it's all going. And I just had a lot of fun drawing like a little kid, just because I really recommend it to artists out there just to have fun and go back to that. So and I'm in Vermont because there's a Center for Cartoon Studies here, which is really an amazing place. And they invited me to be here a fellow for a year, and so I live in the middle of the woods, and it was so beautiful. We just stayed, and now we can't go anywhere because of the virus.
Wow. So you've been marooned in Vermont.
Yeah,
Yes.
which is not that bad. I'm not
No, it
complaining.
is. Quite beautiful. Well, the Henrietta, the book is fascinating because it's the type of book that a child can look at and say, wait, I could do this. You know, it helps, you know, children become self-conscious at a certain age about their drawings, and then they stop doing it, and because it doesn't look like other people's drawings. And this is your
Yeah,
book courses. This
all
instructs.
kids are Basquiat when they are 3 years old, and then when you go to school, you start looking at the other kids and you feel, oh, they are the ones that draw very well. And I was never the best at my school, so it's a book that would have been helpful for me back then because I really wanted to be a cartoonist, but I wasn't never the first, you know, the best one. I was in the middle always.
Makes you, well, sometimes that's motivation actually when you're in the middle. And that's what Picasso used to always say, is he spent his whole life trying to learn how to draw and to paint like a child again, right?
Yeah.
So, or even Matisse later in life.
Yeah, that's the freedom. That's the thing.
Exactly. And this is what you have with pictures and words. Yeah. And Camille, could you tell us a little bit about you and about the story of your book and this exciting adventure with, you know, the outing that takes a very, very magical turn, if you will.
Donc, je m'appelle Camille. Je suis désolée de ne pas pouvoir vous parler en anglais. Je parle très mal l'anglais, je le comprends très mal. J'ai jamais été douée pour ça. Donc voilà, je fais de la bande dessinée pour les enfants et les adultes depuis 15 ans à peu près. J'ai toujours fait écrit pour les adultes et pour les enfants, les deux en parallèle. Plutôt la bande dessinée pour les adultes et puis les livres jeunesse pour les enfants. En général, ce que je fais en livre jeunesse, c'était plutôt jusqu'à maintenant de la commande. Et puis là, j'ai écrit et dessiné une bande dessinée qui est sortie il y a 1 an, qui s'appelle Les Vermeils et qui est plus à destination des enfants. Est-ce que vous voulez traduire ou est-ce que je continue?
Yeah, we should traduire. Hi, I'm called Camille, and I'm really very sorry that I can't speak English adequately. I really understand it, but I speak it very well. I've never been very gifted in that area. What do? I do cartoons. I'm a cartoonist, and I've always worked for adults and for children, and I've been doing this for the last 15 years. I, in fact, do them in parallel for both sections, if you like, and usually I do my cartoons for adults, and I've also done books for young children, usually on commission. And then about a year ago, I did a cartoon book, a comic book for children called Les Vermeils.
Ça, c'est la bande dessinée Les Vermeils, voilà.
This is it,
qui est paru cette année et qui est comme un roman graphique aussi, un peu, mais pour les enfants. Et j'avais envie que ce soit pour un public assez large, que ça aille pour les petits à partir de 5-6 ans et aussi pour les adultes. Ça m'embête quand c'est trop cloisonné et j'avais envie de quelque chose d'assez large pour pouvoir le lire, quelque chose qui plairait à mes enfants et à moi, en fait.
In fact, it's you can see the book there, and it's much more like, if you like, a graphic novel. It was done for children, but also I wanted to have a very large public, an audience. So it goes from kids from about 5 or 6, but also through to adults. In fact, I don't like, and I get rather annoyed when things are closed into an age group. So it's for kids, but it's for a much wider public as well.
Et je pense qu'après, je vais continuer aussi. Ça m'a donné envie, en tout cas, de refaire de la bande dessinée pour enfants. Mais je vais reprendre aussi. Je pense que la prochaine, ce sera une bande dessinée plutôt pour adultes. Et voilà. Et en parallèle, je continue à faire des illustrations pour des jouets pour les enfants, aussi des albums jeunesse. Et puis une de mes bandes dessinées que je suis en train d'adapter avec un réalisateur pour le cinéma.
And also, I'm going to continue to do a comics books for kids, but at the moment I'm working on one for adults in parallel. And also, I'm going to continue I work in illustrations for toys and also for children, and picture books for kids. And also there's another project of the transformation into a film of the book.
Fantastic. The one of the things you just said, I think, is very interesting, is that you don't like it when the book is put in a age group. And it's interesting because adults can read the books with their children. And so adults can read for essentially a book for younger readers, where younger readers can't necessarily read for adults, the same book as an adult would read. So in this way, by drawing for younger readers, you're still reaching the whole age range by doing drawings for younger readers. Does that sound accurate or appropriate?
J'ai pas compris juste la fin, si c'est possible de me traduire juste la fin, pardon.
Oui, c'est justement que si vous faites des dessins pour les plus petits, alors ça est abordable à tous les âges. Alors il faut faire des dessins pour les plus petits pour être compris aussi par tout le public.
Oui, en fait, pardon?
Et il demande si c'est correct l'interprétation de cette idée de...
Oui. En fait, il n'y a pas tellement de différence pour moi d'écrire pour les adultes, pour les enfants. Je crois que je le fais de la même manière. J'essaye juste que les enfants puissent bien me comprendre. Et comme j'ai 2 filles, cette bande dessinée-là, elle est vraiment partie du fait d'être maman. Et je peux leur montrer et savoir si elles comprennent bien. Alors, parfois, il y a des blagues qu'elles ne comprennent pas. Mais c'est pas grave. Moi, ce qui me plaît, c'est qu'il y a un double niveau de lecture, qu'on puisse comprendre l'histoire un petit peu de 2 manières différentes. Je trouve que ça faisait ça quand on était enfant et qu'on lisait des albums comme Astérix et Obélix. On aimait les lire d'une manière quand on était enfant, et maintenant, quand on est adulte, on les lit d'une autre manière. Et moi, ça me plaît ce genre de livre-là.
He says, in fact, I don't really make a difference when I write or I make a book for children or for adults. I really go about it in the same way. And perhaps the comic book for children came about since I'd become a mother. Also, I've been able to show drawings and show things and see that they understand. Perhaps they don't understand certain jokes and funny things in the book, but again, that's a great thing about it. Everybody understands it, or every age group understands it in a different way. For example, Obélix, we understood it in one way as a kid, but when we grow up, we understand it and see it in a different way.
Exactly. Well, we'll talk about this element of subversion a little bit later in the conversation, because I think this is a very important part of what differentiates comics and graphic novels from other forms of literature for this age group, is the subversive element, often with humor. And so it's quite intriguing. But we'll come back to that question perhaps after we have a chance to speak with Emanuele. Could you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about the work you do?
Yes, it's a very pleasure to stay here, not only for the importance of this meeting, but at the same time to stay with these 2 big authors. For some reasons, we tried to publish them, but it was possible in the past, but we hope in the future to do that. At the same time, I am Emanuele Di Giorgi from Tunue. We are a publishing house. I would like to show some stuff, so it's easier to remember how we do. We publish graphic novel for young readers and for old age. We started to publish comics in 2005, and we published more than 400 books, and we published 30 books per year. Our most important collection and the first collection of graphic novel for young readers is Tipi Tondi. Is the biggest collection for young readers in Italy, and the first one, because in Italy there is a very, very strong story about creation of comics for young readers, because a lot of Disney stuff is produced in Italy. A lot of story was serialized on magazine like Corriere dei Piccoli or now Giornalino, but the first graphic novel collection we created it in 2010. Now it's very strong market. It's a market that are increasing. So I finished with my first part of the presentation of myself and the company, but when you want we can say a lot of data. At the same time, I hope to answer at the future question, because it's very interesting the opportunity to explain the difference of something. So
why don't we jump into that before we get into you know, just since you have the screen available to you, maybe you can show just a little market data and while you're
yes, if you want, it's possible. Yes, I prepared it. The first important stuff that the market in Italy increased a lot. This year too, this is data at the end of year, so I didn't show the 2020, but I can say you that this is increasing this time too. So with the COVID and the problem of the market of graphic novel for young readers is increasing. I would like to show you some interesting stuff about this data, because this is the graphic novel part, but the market of books and comics for young readers is composed by a lot of stuff, and I'll show you and I say you, in Italy there is a strong story about Disney stuff. So the half of the market of the comics sold for young readers in Italy is made by Disney, but this data is from the last year, and then we have the graphic novel at 37%. Now I would like to show you this year, because it's very interesting, the changing of the market, because it's low the number of comics sold by Disney, and it's increasing the market of graphic novel. The manga in this part of the market, it's similar. Then you have another part of the manga stuff that it's very increasing, but it's important this part. I would like to end this data with the market share for publisher, and then I would like to say you that I repeat that the market of 2020 it's bigger than 2019. I show you the market share, and the first one is El Castoro, that it's the owner of Tunue. Then the second one is PM, because they publish Dagman. It's a very successful in Italy too. Then we are the third, and then the others. We increased our market share from the last year that was low, the 10%, and then we increased in this year. With Castoro, Tunue, and other publishing house, Sonda, we reach almost 40% of the market share, so it's a very important. Castoro in Italy publish Raina Tegelmeier. and DC Comics, the new line of graphic novel. So I ended with my data, and I give you the word.
Well, let's ask, since we're talking about the spread of the culture of graphic novels and comics, maybe Camille can just address this a little bit, since the history of this, particularly in Europe, was very strong in Belgium and France, from Obelisk and Lucky Luke and Tintin, all going back. But these were always adventure stories, mostly for boys. And so I'm curious, as a woman creator, what is your sort of point of view on the books? Because now really it's girls who are reading much more. But is there a relationship between the way girls and boys read? Do they read differently or similarly when you're creating for them as a author?
Vous avez compris?
Je veux bien que vous me traduisiez parce que je suis pas sûre de tout comprendre.
Alors, parlant de la diffusion de le roman graphique et aussi les BD, l'histoire du BD évidemment vient de la Belge et de la France. On a Obélix, on a Lucky Luke. Il s'agissait toujours des histoires d'aventure pour les petits garçons. Et comme femme, quel est votre point de vue? Car on sait que maintenant les petites filles lisent plus que les garçons. Est-ce qu'il y a une différence entre ce que lisent les petits garçons et les petites filles, selon vous, comme femme créatrice?
Alors, c'est vrai que je pense que les choses ont beaucoup changé ces dernières années. Moi, je me rends compte, par exemple, que quand j'étais enfant, je m'identifiais toujours à des héros masculins, à des petits garçons, par exemple Tom Sawyer, ou enfin, il y en avait beaucoup comme ça, mais il y avait très peu de héroïnes qui étaient représentées, que ce soit dans les dessins animés ou en bande dessinée. Et je pense que c'est en train de changer, notamment parce qu'on est de plus en plus de femmes auteurs, d'autrices qui arrivent. Et donc, on propose des choses différentes. Je pense aussi que la société change et maintenant, il y en a un peu pour tous les goûts. Après, j'imagine que les garçons ne lisent pas tout à fait les mêmes bandes dessinées que les filles, mais je pense qu'il y a aussi des bandes dessinées qui rejoignent, qui peuvent convenir pour les deux âges. Moi, j'ai deux filles, donc c'est vrai que là, j'ai eu envie que mes héroïnes soient des personnages féminins, ça me paraissait important. Et puis parce que je connais mieux, étant une fille et en ayant des filles, je connais mieux les filles, mais c'est pareil, j'aime pas non plus qu'il y ait de manière générale des choses trop spécifiques garçons et trop spécifiquement filles. Dans l'idée, j'aimerais que ça convienne à tout le monde.
Okay. In fact, things have changed quite a lot, I've seen in the last few years. And in fact, when I think back to when I was a child, I identified always with masculine heroes, people like Tom Sawyer, because of course there were many boy heroes at the time and very few heroines, both in comic books or in drawing. But things have definitely changed today, also because we have many more women authors who have come in and many more women cartoonists. Again, society therefore has changed, so the proposal has changed. And however, the market allows things for all tastes. And however, I don't really think that there's such a great difference, or at least I don't like the idea of there being something so specific for one genre or another. I have two daughters myself, so of course, I understand a heroine better, but I also want my heroes to be young girls because I have two daughters. But then again, also because I know that, but I don't like the idea again of compartmentalizing things specifically.
Mm-hmm. And with for example, your book that we're talking about today has animals at the center of it, and often this has been a way that creators have made things very non-sexist, right? Because it's an animal is everybody can relate, boys, girls, young, old. How does this, when you're using animals as stand-in for humans or human-esque characters. What kind of considerations are those when you're thinking about social issues? You know, for example, in your book, the villain in some ways is a cat, right? So you have this, you made a deliberate choice, and I'm just curious, what was your thinking going into these choices? Because the little girl's on an adventure, but the world she travels in is suddenly animal, so it's both recognizable and very different.
Vous avez
Pourquoi
compris?
je pense, c'est pourquoi j'ai choisi ces animaux-là pour représenter
Oui,
les personnages.
Oui, il s'agit vraiment de le choix d'animaux pour substituer, pour représenter les personnes. Mais vous avez le matou qui est, disons, le caractère mauvais de votre histoire. Alors, quelle était votre pensée quand vous avez choisi le matou comme le méchant, quoi? Et alors, la petite fille fait une aventure dans le forêt, mais il voulait savoir comment et pourquoi est-ce que vous avez choisi les animaux et comment est-ce que vous les développez.
En fait, je ne sais pas. Je ne sais pas parce que ça, j'ai pas conscience de tout et j'analyse pas tout et j'aime qu'il y ait une part d'instinct, d'un côté instinctif. En fait, je commence mes histoires sur des carnets comme ça où je dessine des personnages pour essayer de trouver des idées. Donc le premier dessin du matou, le voilà. Et en dessinant, ils ont un caractère. C'est un matou, mais c'est un chat, mais ça aurait pu aussi bien être un autre animal. C'est en le dessinant que je les fais exister, que je les fais naître. Alors le fait que ce soit des animaux, c'est vrai que c'est pratique pour leur donner un caractère très affirmé et pour les dessiner en accentuant leurs défauts ou leurs qualités, en introduisant quelque chose d'un petit peu fantastique, farfelu et comique.
The answer is I don't really know because I do things somewhat unconsciously. I don't analyze everything. How I go about my stories is that I have a little notebook and I draw things and I draw perhaps a character and develop ideas from that. And the tomcat, who's the nasty character, in fact, he took on his character as I drew him, but he could well have been another animal. He didn't have to be a nasty tomcat. If you like, the character comes about as I gradually draw him. His character comes into existence. Again, it's a question, it's a graphic issue of developing a character and accentuating certain characteristics, certain qualities or certain flaws that they have. And that's how it comes about. But to go back to what Camille said at the beginning, she doesn't really analyze it.
Exactly.
Pour moi, c'est pas tellement différent de faire un personnage. C'est un peu pareil de faire un personnage animal que d'un personnage humain. Ce qui compte le plus, c'est que le personnage existe et qu'on a l'impression de le connaître. Et j'ai besoin de le dessiner plusieurs fois comme ça, comme si c'était un petit acteur qui était en train d'exister et que cet acteur, il allait être capable de jouer le rôle que je veux lui faire jouer.
In fact, she says, I don't really make any difference between my human characters and my other animal characters. What has to happen is that they have to start to exist. I have to draw them lots of times so that I can get to know them. And it's a bit like an actor that's gradually taking on the role that he's got to play. It's a gradual thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Camille. I appreciate that. Ricardo, for your characters, for Henriette, the book that you just showed to us, who was born, the character was born out of your comic strip. Did you get to know the character? Did you get to know something new about her as a character in your imagination, as well as Fellini as well, who I believe was also part of the strip too?
Yeah, the character kind of the way my strip works is there are little experiments. So if I want to do like surreal humor, I start maybe drawing like these little elves. Or if I do want to do some, kind of mysterious humor, I have these men in black, so kind of cryptic. And I really love the the trope of the little kid in comics, from Calvin to Mafalda to Charlie Brown. And so even before I came, Henrietta popped into the strip, it was a thing like, maybe shouldn't I, And in Argentina, we have a character that's very well known in France and in Italy, not that much in the United States, that's called Mafalda by Kino.
Oh, I know. I
Sadly
even know who she is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he just passed away.
Passed
This
away,
month.
last week, so that was very sad. But a long, cool life. We're very thankful for that life.
Yes.
And so making a little girl, putting her in a daily strip was a little bit too, people would freak out. It was like drawing two, little Gauls in against Romans, and trying to make an album. People would go like, "Oh, come on." So I kind of kept Henrietta in a very in the infancy world, because Mafalda kind of works like Charlie Brown, where they're little kids, but they are avatars for society and grown-ups.
Yeah.
So I kept Henrietta just me being a shy little girl who reads a lot and talks to her pet, but it's not like a little group of friends. So there's some, and yes, slowly but surely, if you start drawing these characters, like Camille said, you become to know them, and then you ask them questions. You just, what would happen if she's in a swing, or what would happen if she's tries to, I don't know, jump into the bathtub and do like a big splash or whatever. So that's kind of how she popped into my imagination back in 2004. And since then, I'm also very lucky, like Camille. I'm surrounded by girls, by little girls. So I have 3 daughters, and so the first one was more intuitive. Henrietta was a little bit of me remembering how I was as a kid, who I was also very shy. I was also very much into books. I was also kind of a loner. But then when you have kids, they perform this little weird stage play, right? It's like having comic geniuses and like surrealists living with you, only little tiny ones. And so a couple of my books also kind of sprung from just watching them interact amongst themselves, or they bought a toy and how that toy meant something for them, and then I just let my imagination kind of run wild.
And there is a certain element. I mean, since you mentioned Mafalda, obviously it's impossible to talk about cartooning, especially right now without this. But any of the other comics you mentioned as well, like Calvin and Hobbes or The Far Side.
This is my Mafalda book, and this is
wow.
Much attention.
Yes.
I've been teaching Mafalda for a course here, so I've been kind of like paying a lot of attention to these little girls.
Oh, good. There's no translation in English of the complete. This is very upsetting. Yeah. But I mentioned earlier that one of the elements that I think all of your work consistently has, and comics do in general, is an element of subversion, that the humor is subversive. And in a way, it's the type of humor that children really like. They're getting away with being naughty, but not really. And I'm curious, what your point of view on that is. Or they're saying things that adults won't say, but doing it in a way that's very innocent, that was a hallmark of Mafalda, right? I'm going to be a 6-year-old girl saying things I shouldn't be saying, particularly in the political climate where it was created in the 60s. So yeah.
That's definitely, and that's the fun of being a kid, is when you're misbehaving. That's my memory of having the most fun, was doing something really stupid with my cousins, like, oh, we should set fire to this paper boat, and then trying to put some alcohol so it would be more intense, the experience, and then it went really super intense and we were yelling fire, fire. That was fun. And then you become an artist because you want to keep on doing that. You want to keep on misbehaving. You don't want to color by numbers. You want to kind of figure out the numbers, or what are the rules, and then the fun is in kind of like breaking the rules. Whereas if you're an architect or a doctor, you should follow the rules, because otherwise people die. But if if we if we go way out of the line and something that we try doesn't, work,
Yeah.
nobody dies.
Right.
you know.
Very forgivable. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the I love that kind of that aspect of art, that the second you misbehave is when it becomes interesting.
And it's always been a very powerful medium in Latin America, particularly because in Bogota, for example, Colombia is very, is doing the same. A lot of subversive comics, and it's interesting that's very important.
It's kind of a strange place because especially comics, uh, we in Argentina at least, but also most of Latin America, we didn't take good care of it, and we were
No.
lucky enough. No, and we were lucky enough that Europe did pay attention. So many of the books by Brescia, or Trillo and Altuna, or like all these, you can buy them, Muñoz and Sampaio, you can buy them in Europe, and you can't get them in Argentina, which was something that got me super angry at some point. And we started doing publishing books in Argentina with, since Macanudo was doing well. And then I realized, by talking with Françoise Mouly, who's my publisher in United States, and she's famously published Raw back in the 80s with her husband, Art Spiegelman.
Of course.
And we had a talk like back in 2008 that really blew my mind, because Maus kind of opened this door of the graphic novel.
Yes.
So suddenly we all of us artists went out like yelling into the world, like, comics are also for grown-ups, and we can do this thing for grown-ups. And it took us like a long time just to make people figure out it was just a medium. You could tell any kind of story. But I think they did too much of a good job, because at some point in 2008, Francois was like, nobody is publishing graphic novels for kids.
Right.
There are the albums, there are the European albums, there's the superheroes, but all these that we learned how to publish, Chris Ware or Seth or whatever, we're not using that for kids. So that's why she started Toon Books. And it blew my mind. Oh yeah, comics are for kids. That was like the big,
Revelation. Yeah.
What? Comics are for kids? This is crazy. So in Argentina, I also started publishing now comics for kids. This is our last little published experience.
Oh, wow. I've heard of
Fantastic.
This one. Yeah. Lucky enough, lucky for us, now the COVID thing closed up a whole bunch of bookstores, and so it's hard to, even Reina is not a easy sell. But there's a thing that's for me really important about the comics I read as a kid, how much they became part of my DNA. Whereas stuff that I, discover as a grown up, I like and I understand, and I can be cynic or more cerebral. But the stuff that I discover as a kid, it's part of my, I don't know, it's very deep.
You're not judgmental as a kid. You don't. Yeah. You
There's no cynicism. So, Asterix, yeah, he's there, and Mafalda, yeah, she's there. Even the weird names of the artists were like, okay, so they're not human beings, like Hergé or Kino, Uderzo. There were not, not the names of the people I knew. So I didn't even realize there were human beings till I was kind of grown up. I was like, oh, of course he's a human being.
Emanuele, Ricardo just mentioned that it was around 2008 that there was this explosion after, as you mentioned, Spiegelman in the US. This has always existed sort of in France and Belgium, but in the US we had this revival. But you launched your company in 2010 and have now done, I think you said 400 books. What changes have you seen in the trends over the years, over the last decade, from when you began and to the present day? Like, what kind of trends in the books?
We launched our company 5 years before, in 2005. In 2010, we launched our collection for young readers.
Forgive me. Yes.
Yeah, no problem. In 2008, we published arrugas, reeds, wrinkles. One of the most important book in the European market, wrote and drawn by Paco Roca, and we won Luca. We make a lot of stuff, and it's very changed the market, because now the word graphic novel is a passepartout for everything, for the magazine, for newspapers. And the next week we will publish Dragon Hoops by Zhen Wenliang.
Mm-hmm.
And we made a exclusive interview with one of the most important newspaper before that book it was published. So some years before, it was impossible to think at the same time, but I can say that the graphic novel for young readers, it's very increasing the market. In Italy, the graphic novel, we have some Italian authors very well known, with sellings very important, but I think the future, it will be to use and read comics in the school. Because the comics is the language more similar at the internet language, because when you read in internet, you don't read the complete words.
Right.
You read words, bold text, images. You create a compression of the text using words, images, caption, other part of the text. So the graphic novel is very, very similar. At the same time, respect at the movies, serial TVs is not passive. You need to do something. In the white line, you need to do something. So it's very, very, very imaginative opportunities to read comics, and I think the possibilities to read and spread over and the comics in the school is very important, because we hope that not it's only the increasing of 1, 2, 3 years, but I think the comics, it will be like noir, polar, or the name of this kind of books in each market changes. In Italy is called gialli, because Mondadori published it in a cover, yellow cover, all the books. So this kind of market in Italy is gialli. I think it will be the market that it will increase more and more in the next years, and the school, it will be a great opportunity to increase more.
So the big trend from middle grade, particularly, which has been the area that's been fastest growing, middle grade meaning not elementary, but not high school, kind of, let's say 8 to 12, 8 to 13, has been nonfiction. Largely a lot of memoir, because people, I think, find it very intimate. And but when you're looking at, are you seeing an increase in nonfiction stories? And certainly Jean Luen is a perfect example of someone who's done extraordinary nonfiction, or stories based on reality. So I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about that, about whether you're seeing a particular interest in nonfiction.
Yes, in this year I saw a lot of important authors like Rainer Tegelmeier, Jean Luen Yang. We have a strong, like I said, of Disney authors, but it's very different from the nonfiction or fiction. we began to publish graphic novel for young readers with a book from the French market. It's called Octave, and it's wrote by David Chauvel and drawn by Alfred. And I think it's very important because in our idea of comics, the opportunity to give a book that can read the young readers, but at the same time the adult person can understand more, it's very important. I think now, but in comics, not only for young readers, the part of reality, story and person that you can imagine, you can recognize, you can do. I can do that. It's very, very important. At the same time, we publish some character series that has sometimes the problems of the target, like Steven Universe or Phoebe and the Unicorn. That is a very unicorn series, but the language is not only for young readers, but at the same time there are interesting stories that we will publish the next year, like New Kid, Investigators. We are looking a lot at the US market because now there are very, very strong character, very, very strong stories, and
Yes. A question about that, and maybe Emmanuel, Ricardo, and then I will come back to you, Camille, and ask too, is with graphic novels and comics, translation, what are the challenges of translation, or do you find that it's somewhat easier to translate? There's less text, and because the visual is so important to the book, that you can really, you can probably publish books from cultures that might not be as accessible in prose. And also, of course, the expense is somewhat less because there's somewhat less text. And I'm just curious, as publishers, because I think both of you, are working here.
It's easier to read them because we read hundreds and hundreds of comics each year. We have 3 persons that works in this stuff. We have a lot of persons that reads books for us and create summary and reviews. At the same time, but we are focusing our attention to create stories because we sell a lot of books in US market, Dark Horse or Lion Forge or Abrams too. So at the same time, we sell books for in French market, Spanish market. So our idea is to create strong stories that can work in each part of the world. At the same time, there are stories based on Italy, but if you see the Caso Ferrante, it's a novel that sold every part of the world. So it's not a problem to have a story that can stay in French or Spain or Italy or everywhere. But it's very important to create strong stories, and at the same time, our part of realistic stories, it's huge.
Fantastic.
Yeah, for me, when I started doing comics more seriously back in the 90s, all this graphic explosion was kind of in the future. So my fantasy was like Uruguay. Maybe my comics will get to Chile. So I wasn't thinking translation. I was like, oh, maybe it's international. I can tell my father I have a real job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it took me kind of by surprise when my comics and my books started being published elsewhere. English, obviously I can read and understand and kind of figure out what's going on with the translation. Italian, more or less, we Argentinians, we think we can, hey, parliamo italiano, ma non parliamo niente. But it's, but then there are some ones that I just go like, oh, you just cross your fingers. Yeah, I remember with the Czech Republic, they've been publishing my Macanudo books. They are up to 11 books or 12 books. And talking with the translator, she said, I translated the name of your character Enriqueta into Jindrishka. And I thought, oh, it sounds beautiful. Like, and I asked, is that the translation of like Henry, Henrietta, Jindrishka? And she said, no, it's the name of my grandmother. So I have no idea what she's doing, but she's doing it very well because they are up to 11 books. So, but yeah, it's like absolutely surprising. It's always fun to get a book that you did that you can't read. But yeah. But my stories generally are kind of very universal too. Like I don't just because I'm just looking into my household, into my kids, into my life, and then we're all succeeding and failing at the same way.
Same ways. Yeah.
Everywhere in the world.
If I can add something, if you sell something in US, so in English language, we translate before some books before to sell the rights, because if you can pass the books in English, it's easier to read and so the English market is a very important opportunity to spread, to boost everything.
And Camille, what has been your experience with translation, and have you been influenced as a creator by comics from different parts of the world, or has it been primarily French creators? What has been your experience with this international milieu and market as both a creator and also as an author? Yeah.
Alors, l'influence, l'expérience avec la traduction. Pardon? Oui. Alors, la question est votre expérience avec la traduction et ce que vous a été, ce que vous a influencé avec les traductions. C'est-à-dire, avant, on parlait de la possibilité de traduire et de faire passer dans une autre culture les BD et le roman graphique plus facilement qu'un livre, parce qu'il y a moins de texte et donc ça passe mieux. Alors l'autre côté de la question, c'est est-ce que vous avez été influencé par des traductions de choses provenant d'un autre pays, pas seulement les livres en français?
Oui, alors ma bande dessinée, là, les Vermeils, je suis assez contente parce qu'elle est en train d'être traduite dans plusieurs pays. Là, je viens de recevoir juste les exemplaires espagnols. Et puis, elle va être traduite en italien, en allemand, en coréen. Et mon éditeur est en contact avec un éditeur américain, ce qui serait la première fois pour moi. Ce serait une première traduction en anglais, donc ça, je serais très contente. Après, j'avoue que je n'ai pas suivi plus que ça les traductions, puisque je ne parle pas les langues dans lesquelles elles ont été traduites. Donc, je vais plus m'occuper de l'aspect graphique et de comment mon écriture est réécrite, comme j'écris à la main. Mais en tout cas, je sais que pour moi, c'est un grand bonheur de savoir que ce livre est publié dans d'autres langues. Il va être aussi publié en Chine. Donc, je suis très heureuse de savoir qu'il y a des enfants chinois qui vont le lire.
with regard to my books, in fact, my latest book, The Vermeil, is being translated in various languages. The Spanish one is ready, then it's going to be translated into Italian, to German, Korean, and also we have contacts in the US, and that would be a first for me of a translation in English. And so, of course, that makes me very happy. I don't really follow up the translations because I don't have the language ability, but I am quite careful about the graphic side and especially the writing, because I write by hand and I'm interested in how that gets, if you like, translated. But it's a great joy. And also there's an upcoming thing in Chinese, and it'll be very curious to know how the Chinese kids adapt it. Et l'autre partie de la question était quels sont les livres traduits qui vous a influencé?
Alors ça, je dirais que ce qui m'a le plus marqué, c'est quand j'étais étudiante aux Beaux-Arts, j'ai découvert Maus de Art Spiegelman, forcément, et ensuite Chris Ware avec Jimmy Corrigan. Et ça a été une véritable découverte pour moi, et ça fait partie des BD qui m'ont le plus marqué. Les BD de Chris Ware, Daniel Close, Seth. Vraiment, c'est quelque chose.
I shouldn't have translated that because I didn't get the names. Est-ce que vous pouvez répéter les noms, s'il vous plaît?
Alors, Art Spiegelman et Chris Ware.
Spiegelman, okay, et Pete West, oui. Those were the people that most influenced her, but especially when she was a student at the Fine Arts Institute.
Excellent. So we're an hour into our conversation, and one of the things that I know I asked that I think would be interesting is the one thing about comics and graphic novels is they do take some time to produce. They can be, they're quite, they're done by hand. They take labor, genuine work. And I don't know how quickly either Camille or Ricardo works, or Emmanuel, how quickly that you can conceive of a book and publish it. But I'm curious what your point of view would be. Is 2020 and the events of what's happening around us something that you've given much thought to? And then if you have or have not, how would you address this in your own work? Is this something that you think is going to take some time to talk about? Or if you were to do a comic about this year, perhaps you have, Ricardo, but maybe this question we can start with Camille and then and ask. Yes.
Alors, il s'agit du temps. Il faut beaucoup de temps pour produire un BD ou un roman graphique, parce qu'il s'agit d'un vrai travail, un travail même manuel. Alors, aussi, ça c'est la première chose. Combien de temps est-ce qu'il faut pour faire ça? Et l'autre est l'événement de 2020, les choses qui viennent de se passer maintenant. Est-ce que vous avez pensé à affronter comme sujet dans un BD ou dans un roman, ou est-ce qu'il faut avoir un peu de temps pour maturer vos idées sur ce sujet, sur les événements? Et est-ce que vous avez pensé peut-être à le rendre dans un BD?
Non, alors c'est vrai que c'est très long à faire une bande dessinée, et pour moi je prends toujours beaucoup de temps, surtout que je fais toujours des bandes dessinées qui sont très épaisses, donc je mets plusieurs années à les faire. Souvent c'est en plusieurs temps, pendant plusieurs mois ou années, je note des envies et des idées dans les carnets. Au bout d'un moment je me dis ça y est, je veux vraiment le faire concrètement. Donc les Vermeils, ça m'a pris peut-être 2 ans. Maintenant, par rapport à l'année 2020, non, j'ai pas réfléchi à une idée par rapport à ce qui s'est passé. Je crois qu'aussi il faut qu'il y ait du temps pour digérer tout ça, et je ne sais pas si au bout d'un moment je dessinerai tous mes personnages avec des masques dans la rue, par exemple, mais pour l'instant, j'ai pas réfléchi à ça. Je suis pas là-dedans.
Yeah, it does take a very long time, as you say, to produce a comic book or a graphic novel. For me, it takes years, in fact. What I do is that I note in a notebook over months and even years, and then at a certain point, I say, well, look, I've got to stop and I've got to get going and do it. For example, the latest book took me 2 years. With regard to the question about 2020, I haven't thought about it. Haven't really had any ideas. I think it takes some time to digest things. Okay, what we could think about, people in masks in the road, but I haven't really thought about it.
Fair enough. That makes a lot of sense. Ricardo, so you're doing a daily comic. I imagine you have addressed the 2020, and I'd be curious how you think about this.
I have this one. So it says, "Remember 2020?
Yes.
Yeah, that year was crazy." And then, "What do you mean? It's still 2020." Ah! And then someone was like, "Wear a mask." Ah! So it's been on my mind, sadly enough. We've all gotten the question, how did this affect you? And I'm pretty sure Camille had the same experience as me, as we've always been kind of a quarantined type of people, the cartoonist, and we like being in our studios and drawing. So it's not as hard as I would guess actors and sports people, but it's been, yeah, that's definitely weird. In the daily strip, I can just use a little idea and do my little catharsis and put it out in the world, and then I keep going. A longer work, it's gonna I can't even begin to think about it, because the way I work my books is I do places where I want to go. And so I have little girls uh, playing with balloons, or going into these adventures and going out in the wild. And I if I was a playwright, this is the perfect year. There's gonna be
Right.
so many plays about people locked in houses going crazy. But for me as a cartoonist, I just use this thing to get out.
You use your cartoons to escape the reality of 2020,
Exactly.
not to address the reality of 2020.
Exactly. So I can do my little strips, but if I'm gonna do 100 pages or 200 pages, it's not gonna be inside a house with people, or
No.
people wearing masks. That it's very hard to draw and figure out who's who if everyone's wearing a mask.
Artists are the sane ones. That's great.
But there are gonna be some interesting works coming down. So
You feel that this is a creative period. Yeah. Interesting. Emanuele, how have you experienced 2020, and have you seen works that are wanting to address this and try to even directly or indirectly?
I show you this. It's the same in the same part of the world. This year is the year of COVID. No, not only the Apocalypse Zombie 2. So at the same time, for us, it was a great opportunity, because we published not only graphic novel, but 5 years ago we began to publish literary novel. We arrived at the final prize Strega, so with important books, but the sellings not was very important. So we decide to concentrate our attention on graphic novels. Because we began to publish graphic novel, we have one of the large collection of graphic novel in Italy, and we began to read with a very strong attention the books from US market. So in this year we bought New Kid, Investigators, that we will publish the next year. We bought Phoebe and the Unicorn, Avatar, Dragon Hoops. So we bought a lot of important books. we are continuing to read. We both at the same time last summer with Cass of Mark Riley, so books that never published in US, but we are reading the future book. For us, it's a very important year. At the same time, we are selling more than last year. It's a very strong stuff, this, because it's not so easy. Italian market, it's less than 7%. The graphic novel market, total graphic novel market, it's zero. The market for young readers is increasing, but less than our percentage, that is 20% more than last year of sellout. So it's a very important part of the year. At the same time, we are producing less. So this number is huge number, because we are reaching this number with less books. This part is very important, because we are giving the right attention at each book, at the same time at the Italian book, because we create more than 50% of our production is from Italian authors. So we are producing less, but we are producing with more attention, and we are seeing at the future with hope. But at the same time, there are a lot of concernings of this year, because some part of the market is not working in the right way, so it's not so easy.
Well, publishing and writing and producing comics is always a challenge, but it's one that I think all of us get a lot of joy from. This has been a big pleasure of mine to get to meet all of you virtually. I'm a big fan, and I've gotten to discover some new works in researching this panel, as well as to just share some of your ideas with the world. It's been a real treat. We just want to thank the Bologna Book Fair, the Bologna Fiere, for organizing this. Again, this is in anticipation that next year we will all be able to gather in Bologna, we hope, at the Comics Corner, where all of your work will be on display, as well as that of your esteemed colleagues. Again, I want to just thank Emanuele, Camille, Ricardo for taking some of your Saturday today to share this with us and with the audience at the Frankfurt Book Fair as well. So thank you again. I'm Ed Nowatka from Publishers Weekly, and you can always find more information about each of the authors, who all have been praised by the Ragazzi Award committees on the website of the Bologna Fiere. So thank you very much. We really hope to see everyone in 2021. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to see you all.
Bye-bye, everybody.